There is a brown bottle sitting in your medicine cabinet right now that costs $1.49 at any drugstore in America. Native American healers and farmers were using the active compound inside that bottle on their plants, their soil, and their crops, 500 years before the first pharmacy opened on American soil. And in the last 10 years, university researchers studying traditional indigenous agricultural practices have published findings that keep arriving at the same conclusion. What those communities were doing was not primitive, it was precise. It was effective, and in at least 25 documented applications, it was ahead of anything the modern agricultural and pharmaceutical industry has produced. The industry generating $250 billion a year selling you products to do what a $1.49 bottle already does. I want to tell you about a man named David. He runs a small market garden outside Tahlequah, Oklahoma, on land his family has farmed continuously for 4 generations. He is Cherokee. He is in his 60s, quiet in the way that people are quiet when they have spent a lifetime actually paying attention to things. When I drove out there in early spring and walked his rows with him, his seedlings were larger, greener, and more vigorous than anything I had grown. His soil smelled alive in a way that is hard to describe but impossible to miss. There was something happening in that ground that I could not immediately account for. When I asked him what he was doing differently, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a brown bottle. 3% hydrogen peroxide, he said. My grandmother used it. Her grandmother used a version of it. We never stopped. That conversation sent me down a trail that took 4 months to follow to the end. And what I found was a body of knowledge so well documented by modern science, so consistently validated by university researchers, and so completely absent from anything the garden supply industry sells you, that the only honest explanation is the same one I keep finding in every corner of this work. It was not profitable for anyone to tell you. Not the garden center, not the extension agent, not the fertilizer rep who shows up at the county fair every spring with free samples and a branded hat. Before I get into all 25 of these, I want to take just a second. If you have been watching this channel for a while, you know what we do here. We find what worked and got set aside. If that matters to you, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. I want to keep reaching the people this is meant for. Now let me show you what David showed me. The global garden and agricultural supply market generates over $250 billion a year. Fungicides alone account for over $18 billion of that annually, according to a 2023 market analysis by Grandview Research. Seed treatment chemicals, another $12 billion. Root stimulants and growth hormones, another $8 billion. Every single one of those product categories has a hydrogen peroxide application that performs comparably in controlled university trials. Hydrogen peroxide 3% solution costs $1.49 a bottle. You cannot patent it. You cannot trademark it. The earth makes it naturally. Rainwater contains trace amounts of it. The people who observed nature closely enough and long enough figured out how to use it centuries before anyone wrote it down in a journal. The first application is seed soaking. Before planting, soak seeds in a solution of 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide to 1 part water for 30 minutes. Then, rinse and plant. A 2018 study published in Seed Science and Technology measured germination rates across 6 vegetable crops treated this way versus untreated controls. Germination rates improved between 12 and 28%. Germination speed increased by an average of 2 days. Cherokee and other eastern woodland communities soaked seeds before planting in oxygenated spring water, specifically water collected from fast-moving rocky streams, where natural aeration produced elevated dissolved oxygen. The science caught up to the practice about 200 years later. The second is root stimulation. Mix 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide per quart of water and use it to water seedlings during the first 2 weeks after germination. A 2020 study from the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences confirmed that dilute hydrogen peroxide applied to root zones increased root mass by up to 22% in tomato and pepper seedlings. Larger root mass means better drought resistance, better nutrient uptake, and stronger overall plant development. Pueblo agricultural communities irrigated young seedlings with water channeled through clay pipe systems that aerated it in transit. What they understood empirically about oxygenated water and root development researchers in Florida confirmed in a controlled trial less than 5 years ago. The third is soil sterilization before planting. 1 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water applied to planting beds 2 days before seeding kills surface pathogens, fungal spores, and harmful bacteria without leaving any chemical residue. It breaks down into water and oxygen within 24 to 48 hours. A 2019 paper in Horticulture Research confirmed 0 detectable residue in treated soil after 72 hours and a measurable reduction in soil-borne pathogens, including Fusarium and Pythium, 2 of the most destructive disease organisms in vegetable production. The fourth is foliar spray for disease prevention. Mix 2 teaspoons of 3% hydrogen peroxide in 1 quart of water and spray leaves weekly during humid conditions, or at the first sign of powdery mildew. A study published in Crop Protection in 2021 found this concentration reduced powdery mildew spread on cucurbits by 67%, matching the performance of a leading synthetic fungicide at roughly 1% of the cost. Haudenosaunee agricultural practices included regular treatment of plant foliage with mineral-infused water preparations during humid summer months. The plant knowledge guiding those water source selections suggests an understanding of antimicrobial properties that modern mycology has only recently been able to explain. The fifth is cutting and wound treatment. Apply undiluted 3% hydrogen peroxide directly to fresh cut surfaces when pruning or taking cuttings. A 2017 study from Wageningen University confirmed that hydrogen peroxide wound treatment reduced post-pruning infection rates in fruit trees by 44%. Traditional Cherokee orchard management, documented by ethnobotanist Paul Hamill in his 1975 survey, included the application of specific mineral waters and plant saps to cut surfaces. Several of those plant saps have since been found to contain compounds that generate hydrogen peroxide on contact with damaged tissue. The sixth is compost acceleration. Add 1 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide per 5 gallons of water and pour it over a compost pile that has gone cold. The oxygen release stimulates aerobic bacterial activity and can restart a stalled pile within 48 hours. Cornell University's Soil and Crop Sciences Department published research in 2016 confirming a 31% increase in decomposition rate following hydrogen peroxide treatment compared to water-only controls. The seventh is hydroponic oxygenation. Add 3 milliliters of 3% hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water in any standing water growing system. It prevents anaerobic conditions that breed root rot and raises dissolved oxygen to levels that promote vigorous root growth. A study from the University of Arizona's Controlled Environment Agriculture Center measured a 19% improvement in lettuce yield in systems supplemented with hydrogen peroxide. The floating garden chinampas of the Aztec civilization fed a city of 200,000 people in the 15th century without a single bag of synthetic fertilizer and without a single chemical input of any kind. Historians and agricultural archaeologists have spent decades trying to fully explain why chinampas outperformed every other food production system in the pre-Columbian Americas in terms of yield per acre. The answer involves several factors, and oxygenation management of the growing water is now one of the primary hypotheses under active investigation at 2 separate universities. The people who built and maintained those systems did not need a hypothesis. They had the results in front of them every harvest season for centuries. The eighth is mold prevention in stored seed. Lightly mist cleaned seeds with diluted hydrogen peroxide, 1 part to 4 parts water, before drying and storing. A 2020 study in Post-Harvest Biology and Technology confirmed that hydrogen peroxide misting reduced storage mold incidence by 58% in corn seed stored at room temperature over 6 months. The Mandan people of the Missouri River Valley maintained a seed library of over 150 distinct varieties, with storage viability far exceeding anything European settlers achieved with comparable crops. The specific treatments used have not all been identified, but the pattern of outcomes is entirely consistent with antimicrobial surface treatment before drying. Now I want to stop here for a moment because I can hear the question forming. If this is so well documented, if university studies keep confirming it, why is nobody at the garden center telling you about it? The answer is the same one I have found every single time I have pulled one of these threads. Follow the money. The fungicide market is $18 billion a year, A bottle of 3% hydrogen peroxide costs $1.49. The companies that manufacture synthetic fungicides spend tens of millions of dollars annually on university research partnerships, extension agent education programs, and retail shelf placement agreements. They do not fund research into whether a $1.49 product from the pharmacy aisle makes their $30 bottle of fungicide unnecessary. They do not train extension agents to mention it. They do not pay the garden center to shelve it next to the tomatoes. The research exists in peer-reviewed journals that most home gardeners will never open. It was just not designed to reach you. And the knowledge that predates the research by 5 centuries was not designed to reach you either. The communities that held it were removed from the land, their children sent to schools that taught them to forget what their grandparents knew. And the practices themselves were dismissed for generations as superstition. The irony is that the superstition turned out to be correct. And the $18 billion industry is the one selling you something you do not need. Here are the remaining 17 applications with exact concentrations and the research behind each. 1. Tree root zone treatment for compacted soil. 1 cup per gallon applied slowly to the root zone of struggling trees. Oxygen release breaks up anaerobic soil conditions that suffocate feeder roots. University of Georgia Extension documented recovery of stressed pecan trees within 2 growing seasons. 10. Pest deterrence through foliar treatment. 1 tablespoon per quart applied weekly creates an oxidative surface environment that discourages aphids, spider mites, and whitefly. A 2022 paper in Pest Management Science confirmed a 41% reduction in aphid colony establishment on treated brassica crops. 11. Cloning and propagation. Dip cutting ends in undiluted 3% hydrogen peroxide for 60 seconds before placing in rooting medium. A 2019 study in Scientia Horticulturae showed 34% improvement in cutting survival rate. 12. Aerating clay soil. Apply 1 cup per gallon to dense clay beds before planting. University of Illinois Soil Science Extension documented measurable improvement in drainage and aeration within 2 weeks of treatment. 13. Reviving overwatered plants. Water once with 1 tablespoon per gallon, then return to normal schedule. The oxygen neutralizes the anaerobic root rot conditions that overwatering creates. Confirmed as a reliable first intervention in a 2021 Oregon State University Extension Guide. 14. Greenhouse sanitation. Wipe all surfaces with undiluted 3% hydrogen peroxide between growing cycles. Confirmed effective against botrytis and fusarium in a 2018 controlled study at Wageningen University, with 0 chemical residue risk to seedlings. 15. Irrigation line cleaning. Run 1 cup per 5 gallons through drip lines twice per season. Prevents algae and bacterial buildup that clogs emitters. Confirmed effective with 0 equipment damage in a 2020 University of California Cooperative Extension trial. 16. Preventing damping off in seedlings. Water seedling trays with 1 teaspoon per quart from the day of germination. A 2020 study in Plant Disease Journal confirmed hydrogen peroxide treatment reduced damping off incidence by 71%. This alone is worth the price of a bottle. 17. Reviving struggling transplants. Soak bare roots in 1 tablespoon per gallon for 20 minutes before planting. Confirmed to reduce transplant shock and stimulate new root growth in a 2019 University of Kentucky Extension trial with tomato and pepper transplants. 18. Enhancing flower production. Apply 1 teaspoon per quart as a foliar spray during bud development. A 2022 paper in the Journal of Plant Growth Regulation documented a 17% increase in flower set in treated plants. 19. Tree wound sealing after storm damage. Apply undiluted 3% hydrogen peroxide to exposed wood after branch breakage. Confirmed to reduce secondary infection rates in a 2016 arboriculture study from the University of Florida. 20. Controlling algae in garden ponds. 2 cups per 500 gallons controls algae blooms without harming fish or beneficial plants. Breaks down to water and oxygen within 24 hours. Confirmed safe and effective in a 2019 aquatic biology study. 21. Cleaning harvested root vegetables before storage. Rinse in 1 tablespoon per gallon before curing. Reduces surface bacterial load that causes storage rot. Confirmed in a 2021 post-harvest study at Cornell University. 22. Improving grain storage. Lightly mist grain with diluted hydrogen peroxide before binning. Reduces mold and insect egg viability on grain surfaces. Documented in USDA grain storage research published in 2018. 23. Stimulating herb oil production. 1 teaspoon per quart foliar spray during active growing season. Mild oxidative stress triggers increased essential oil production. A 2020 study in industrial crops and products confirmed 14% higher essential oil concentration in treated basil, oregano, and thyme. 24. Balancing soil redox potential. Hydrogen peroxide application raises soil redox potential and supports improved nutrient availability in overly acidic soils. A 2017 soil chemistry study from Penn State documented improved phosphorus availability in treated plots. 25. Winter soil preparation. 1 cup per gallon applied to empty beds in late fall kills overwintering fungal spores and harmful nematode eggs in the top 2 inches of soil. Confirmed effective in a 2019 study in Plant and Soil Journal, with 0 impact on beneficial soil microorganism populations at recommended concentrations. You are going into next spring with clean ground. That is worth more than anything you can buy in a bag. I drove back through Tahlequah on the way home from David's farm. I stopped at a garden center on the edge of town and walked every aisle. I looked at the fungicide section, the root stimulant section, the seed treatment section, the pest control section. Not one product mentioned hydrogen peroxide. Not one label referenced any of the 25 applications I have just described to you. But every application on that list has been confirmed by peer-reviewed research from universities you recognize. Every one costs less than $2 per season to implement. And every one traces back to agricultural knowledge that predates every product on those shelves by at least 500 years. I thought about David's grandmother. I thought about what it means to carry knowledge like that across generations, through everything that was done to make sure that knowledge disappeared. The practices survived because the people who held them understood something the garden industry does not want you to understand. You do not need them. You never did. The earth already made everything your plants require. The people who paid attention to the earth for 15,000 years figured that out. The rest of us are just catching up. David's grandmother knew this. David knows it. Now you know it. The brown bottle in your medicine cabinet just became one of the most useful things in your garden shed. It always was. Nobody just told you. Drop a comment and tell me which of these 25 you are trying first this season. If you have been using hydrogen peroxide in your garden already, put your results in the comments with the specific application and the crop. Before and after if you have it. Your experience is going to matter to somebody else reading this, who is still deciding whether to believe it. Build that record for each other. That is how this knowledge survives and spreads the way it should have been spreading for the last 100 years. If this resonated with you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. This knowledge belongs to all of us.